everyone, this is Malia, and this week I am covering Paper Girls, Volume 1. Let's get into it. Paper Girls is written by Brian K. Vaughan, with artist Cliff Chang, colors by Matt Wilson, and letters by Jared K. Fletcher. It was published by Image Comics and is 144 pages. With Paper Girls, we see a pretty standard structure for the story. Act 2 is going to be the largest part of it, with the rising action and the climax, and building up to that point. Act 1 is a bit bigger than Act 3. I think it took away from that, but it was our first time into this world, so I think we needed that space to get the exposition over to us. And then Act 3, you'll see, is the smallest. And so I made this graph here. You can kind of see the percentages and how they compare to one another. I believe that Paper Girls is a graphic novel. It is one narrative that is spread throughout the entire story. It's not a sort of collection. The girls are trying to stop a force of aliens that have invaded the night after Halloween, and their loved ones have started to go missing, so they're fighting that evil force and trying to get their friends and family back. So in Act 1, pages 1 through 40, we're given exposition. We'll be introduced to Erin, who is on the left-hand picture there, and then also be introduced to the supporting characters and enemies. You'll see her friends over there on the right, and then we'll also establish the date and time of the story. So Erin is our protagonist of this story. She is new in town, and we get a little bit of hints from her family that they may not be well liked. She really cares for her sister. You'll see in that far right image, there's a demon there that is torturing her sister. That is a dream sequence that we open up into, and I think that quickly establishes that Erin is our protagonist over the other girls. We get to see inside her head a lot more. We don't really get to see in the heads of the other girls, and so we understand her fears and her hopes. She really wants to protect her family is her main goal there, and then especially that comes into risk when some time travelers come and mess the town up and people start disappearing. So then you'll have the supporting characters here. There's KJ, Tiffany, and Mac. They're the other Paper Girls, and they run into Erin on November 1st when she's starting to do her route. We get to know them through the dialogue, which I think is really nice because it's very seamless sort of information being fed to us. We learn that Mackenzie's a little bit of a rebel. In other conversations, we'll learn about her family not being the best and having sort of a criminal background. She talks about her brother quite a bit. And then KJ, we find out is Jewish, and then Tiffany is kind of a nerd, and we'll see that developed further as well. I really like how they introduce the setting in Paper Girls. We get it a lot in Act 1, and then it's sprinkled throughout the story in sort of background props and then through pop culture references and dialogue. But you can see in the images on this slide, we get to see a calendar that says that it's November 1st. We see her bring in the papers, the Cleveland preservers, so we know she's near the Cleveland area. And then what's going on politically during that time. We know that we're in the 80s still. And then we get that digital clock as well that tells us how early in the morning it is, which is also hinted at in just how disheveled and sort of angry she looks at being up so early. Finally, in Act 1, we're going to meet our initial enemies. On the left, you'll see that there's some boys dressed from Halloween still who bully Erin before getting saved by Mac. And then there's these three mysterious figures with strange eyeballs who attack Tiffany and steal her walkie-talkie later. We do end up getting a sort of deeper story with more enemies, but Act 1 sets up conflict with these two groups at least first, and that sort of gets us started with the action. Act 2 goes from pages 41 to 140. We'll see rising action, character developments and arcs, and all of that will build into the climax. Act 2 did a really great job of keeping the action going. Once everything kind of explodes, there's dinosaurs in the sky, people are going missing even mid-conversation, and then it even turns out that who we thought were the villains were not the villains. They become our allies for the girls, and so we see a lot of that rising action, which is going to continue to build over into the climax. Tiffany went through perhaps the best character arc, in my opinion. She gets attacked by a monster, and her nightmare is basically playing this video game level over and over again. She comments that she hates it and she realized that she was wasting her life, and then you'll see later in the story where she jumps into action because of this. She says she's not going to sit around anymore. So I really thought that was interesting, and I didn't expect to get that sort of development from a more background character like Tiffany. We also see some character development in Mac. I don't think she's finished by any means. She's a very rough around the edges kind of character. She acts like she's very tough and doesn't care about anyone, and then she often says homophobic things. So we see her kind of towards the end appreciate two characters, one of which at least has said that he is homosexual, and she sort of starts to soften on her stance there. And then we also see when she's interacting with her stepmother that she's actually very loyal. Even with Erin, she's very loyal despite just meeting her that night. And she cares about those around her and is very fiercely protective. And then we end Act 2 with the climax. So everything that's been building is this sort of showdown with this older man. We've seen those soldiers report back to him, ask him for further action if they can escalate. We've also seen the two teenagers from the future warn the girls about him, and it's very clear that he's after that Apple device that Erin found at the end of Act 1. So it comes to a final showdown with them where he's outside the house confronting them, telling them, that he needs to hand everything over. Erin even says, hey, this is over, but she ends up using the Apple device, and that'll bring us into the next issue to see how that affects the girls. But whereas the main goal is just to try to avoid this man and make sure that he doesn't get that Apple device, they have succeeded in this moment, in this climax, by escaping. And then Act 3 is very brief. We just get a few pages from 141 to 144. It provides a resolution to the climax, and then it's going to show the consequences. So we can kind of see that in the art of the girls falling, and it looks like they're falling into different places. Looks like they're even falling into different times as we see that 1999 go by. And then we see the results of that. KJ is missing at the end. They don't know where she's at. And then they meet this strange woman that you'll see on the right, who is actually, spoilers if you want to know, plug your ears. But if you don't mind, then it is Erin. It's an older version of herself. And so with the end of Act 3, that kind of, it leaves us a bit on a cliffhanger to go into the next issue. There are some themes, though, to explore with Paper Girls. The one that really stood out to me just immediately was Garden of Eden. We see this in the opening scene, which is on that bottom left side. It's Erin holding an apple. She does go to Catholic school, as do a couple of the other characters, so it makes sense that there's some biblical themes here. But she's holding that apple, and then at the end of Act 1, she has that little Apple device. We see, I think he's Ronald Reagan. I'm 90% sure he's Ronald Reagan. But he gives her a black apple with a bullet hole in it after she gets shot. And then even the old man, he has an apple emblem on his shirt. And then Erin references the Tree of Knowledge. I do think this is going to relate to the next theme that I have in sort of the price of knowledge, kind of like the price of growing up, and losing that sort of childhood innocence. But there's definitely that theme of apples throughout that's painted very clearly. And so yeah, then here we are with the fear of adulthood. Sorry that the dad looks so gross at the bottom there. But we see where the girls realize, oh, I didn't know grown-ups got scared too, is what Erin realizes in the dream sequence with her dad. And then Mac dealing with her stepmother who believes they're in rapture, and tries to kill herself. But she says to them that she wishes that she was younger. Those were the best days of her life. And then even just the main plot of those teenagers from the future, it is a sort of generational conflict that they're going through. So Paper Girls did a really great job, I think, with the flow. The transitions were pretty abrupt, but I think they were easy to follow still because of the dialogue being very clear. And then as far as the Z form, you can kind of see with the patterns I've drawn here where the eye contact follows, and then there's just different lines. And then action was really great with driving the eye in a direction, as you'll see with Mac attacking one of the teenagers. If you are interested, Paper Girls does have a TV adaptation on Prime Video. I do believe it's just one season and it was canceled after that, but if you are interested and would prefer to try it in television format first, definitely check it out there. Overall, I really like Paper Girls. My rating is 9 out of 10. I think the artwork's beautiful. I think the characters are diverse and then also multifaceted in their flaws. Um, Love a good 80s setting, especially coming of age. The villains were interesting. It had a nice balance of action and character and story development. And the cliffhangers are really well done too. I've passed by this story a lot in bookstores and I've always meant to get it. So I'll definitely be buying the next issue. I think they even have a sort of like complete set that maybe I can get, but I would definitely recommend it to friends and peers. The only reason I'm knocking it down from a 10 out of 10 is that Mac is homophobic. I know that they were trying to stay true to the times because they sucked like that. But if you are someone that is sensitive to that, they do drop the F-bomb on there. So I would just tread with caution if that is a concern for you. But overall, it is a great work, and I do think Mac is going to get better about that. So, yeah, definitely recommend it. Just be wary of that. And that is my presentation on Paper Girls. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my presentation. Feel free to comment if you have anything you want to go over about this story. If you've read it, I'd love to hear your take on it. Otherwise, feel free to check out the links I've put in this slide to contact me. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks.